Welcome to another episode of Love Living Local 315. We are your hosts, Scott and Kelly Greats, and our mission is to shine a spotlight on amazing people doing amazing things right here in Central New York. And today we have guest Phil Bean, historian, nonprofit leader, and co-founder of Olmsted City of Greater Utica. After a career in higher ed and decades away from his hometown, Phil returned to Utica to help preserve a remarkable and little-known piece of American landscape history, the Olmsted-designed park and parkway system. He's here to share why this legacy matters, how it's impacting everyday life, and what it means for the future of the Mohawk Valley. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to be back, right? So you spent a little time away. You came back in 2019. What brought you back home?
Well, no matter where I went or lived over the course of 43 years, Utica, Central New York, the Mohawk Valley remained home for me. So I always had an affection for this area and an interest in it. But more specifically, I came back for a number of different reasons. One was I got tired of spending 45 minutes just driving to get milk. You know, living in a large metro area, everything takes forever, and you lose a large part of your life in traffic, and that got tiresome. I also came back because it's really affordable here. You know, real estate in Utica has done nothing but go up for the past 20 years. But it's still a lot more affordable than the rest of the country. I also came back because the climate, believe it or not. So we all talk about the winters. Yes, I'm not too fond of the second half of the winter, and that's what most people will say. But I'm also not fond of part of the summer in many places. And in Philadelphia, a place I love, it's a great city. It's only 4 hours to the south of here, but there are 4 times more days over 90, and there's humidity, and there's air pollution. And so the summers could actually be downright miserable. So, and then on top of everything else, I like the fact that we have some great amenities here. Now, we have fewer than you have in a larger metropolitan area, but the reality is that people in the larger metropolitan areas don't go to those things as much as people in places like here think they do.
Because of the traffic.
Because of the traffic and the cost. It's not accessible. So what we do have is accessible. So I like all that, and I love the scenery around here. The countryside around Utica and the whole of central and upstate New York is really, really striking.
Well, what a great answer. And you just described our lives from 01 to 06.
Yep.
We were in Northern Virginia, right outside of D.C., and you talk about traffic. You talk about opening the sliding glass door in August,
July,
and you just get hit with a wall of heat where you can't even be outside, and the pollution. And so, it's a little known fact, actually, that the Northeast gets more days over 90 than Florida does. Because of the humidity. You know, they don't get the humidity. So, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So let's talk about what do you remember about the parks growing up near Conkling Park and the Parkway? What do you remember when you were younger about those parks?
Well, so when I was a kid, I had no idea who Olmsted was. I just knew that I grew up around something that was kind of special. Have essentially a little piece of the countryside right in my neighborhood, and this beautiful roadway that I used to ride my bike up and down all the time. And I like to tell a story about when I was a freshman at Union College in Schenectady. My freshman advisor had this little sheet of information about me, and he said, "Oh, you're from Utica, huh?" And I said, "Yeah." And then he said something that seemed to suggest that Utica wasn't up to his high standards. So I without even thinking about it, I immediately launched into describing the parks and parkway system in Utica. And he leaned back in his chair and he said, "I never knew there was anything like that in Utica." And, that's because he'd never been to Utica, but also because people in this area are a little too modest about what we have in this region. We need to talk it up more and be less modest and less apologetic, because what we have in Utica and other parts of this region is actually pretty special.
Yeah. Reading through the information you sent to us, I was inspired, frankly. You epitomize Utica, right? You live it, you studied it, and it's awesome to hear. And one thing that stood out was, and I'm paraphrasing, but you said, the stories we tell today are how we're going to be remembered in the future or tomorrow. And that kind of made me pause. And, sometimes we get caught in this whole, Utica or, growing up, the stories, I grew up in the 80s here. The armpit of New York.
We couldn't wait to move. As soon as we graduated from college, we were gone.
Literally, both of us, growing up in Frankfurt, right outside of Utica.
Yep.
And, there was no other thought in our heads. Like, we just couldn't wait to leave. And then we came back, but that's a whole nother. But anyway, talk a little bit about, the stories and what the work you're doing to help change the narrative.
Yeah, and that is a central part of what we're trying to do. We have a kind of a multi-part strategy that informs everything we're trying to do. And one part of it is that every person in every place needs a narrative. It needs a story. And for the longest time, people in this region, for reasons I think we all get, concentrated on the negative stories. And in fact, they concentrated to the extent that they even started making stuff up. And they reveled in it. And it was self-destructive. Because, as I often put it, it's kind of like being a teenager who runs around and keeps saying, I'm so ugly, and then wonders why nobody invites them to the prom. Right. Who wants to help or be part of a community that's always putting itself down? Mm-hmm. But the secret to making a powerful narrative is it has to be true. And what I liked, another thing that brought me back to Utica was I saw, for the first time perhaps in my life, a greater interest in hearing positive stories about the region. But they had to be, of course, true. And in the Olmsted story, we have a true story that is of some significance, and it is super positive.
So why don't you tell that story?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who is Olmsted? What's the story?
So we'll start with Dad. Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. was the co-designer of Central Park, and then he went on to design or co-design hundreds of landscapes across the United States. Typically, they're very famous, well-known landscapes. And he's the father of the American urban park. He had two sons, John Charles and Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. And Jr. was the guy who did the work in Utica. So a lot of kids who grow up with powerful, important parents wilt under the shadow of their parents. And that did not happen with Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. He created landscape designs for the White House grounds, for the Jefferson Memorial, for the National Cathedral. He redesigned the National Mall in Washington. He did work on several national parks and even was one of the driving forces behind the creation of Everglades National Park in Florida. He helped create the National Park Service and save the giant redwoods. So we're talking about somebody who did a lot of significant stuff.
Yeah.
Very influential.
About what time frame are we in, Phil?
He was active between the late 1890s and shortly before his death in 1957. Okay. So, and the father was active from the late 1850s. So between the late 1850s and the late 1950s, the father and the two sons did more to change the American landscape for the better than any three people you could possibly imagine. Huh. So this is serious American history, and it became much more appreciated, I think, across the country when the father had his bicentennial of his birth was celebrated in 2022. So our piece of that history is unusual. Utica is apparently the small city in the country that has an Olmsted Parks and Parkway system. It was an intentionally created system of parks tied together by a parkway. And this system is 75% the size of Central Park for a city that has 4% the population of Manhattan. It is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And not only that, it's not just the Parks and Parkway, but there are neighborhoods adjacent to that system that were also designed by Olmsted Brothers. So from the farthest end of East Utica up into upper South Utica, there's an almost uninterrupted, what you could call Olmsted zone or Olmsted district that is proportionately, bigger than any kind of development of that sort you're going to find almost anywhere in the country. It certainly doesn't fit with the stereotype of a small mill town. And when I go around, not only to national Olmsted conferences, but I just talk to people in places like New York or Philadelphia or Boston where they know the Olmsted name and they respect it. And I tell them what we have. They're rocked by it. So we need to be rocked by it too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was rocked by it when I read all the information that you gave me. And here we've been to Proctor Park, but just to watch soccer games, or we've never actually, I feel terrible about this.
In the park.
Spent time in the park walking the trails, and the pictures that you sent us are just amazing. So you co-founded the Olmsted City Foundation in 2021.
That's correct.
Okay. What's the mission?
So the mission is, there are two different things that we're trying to do. One is we're trying to do that. We have an educational part where we're trying to raise awareness about this, what we have in Utica, and why it is significant, and why people should be proud of it, and why Utica deserves to call itself an Olmsted City. And that's the narrative part. We're giving people a true positive narrative about Utica. The other part of it is we're trying to restore those parts of that system that need restoration. The neighborhoods have largely held up. Over 100 years after they were developed, they're still among the best neighborhoods in that part of this region, in terms of holding up their value and overall people keep up their properties. The parks, however, a different story. And people will often groan and say, "Oh, that's Utica." Well, that's not Utica. All over the Northeast, these in the second half of the 20th century, these large historic parks went into decline. If you'd gone, maybe you did, in the 1970s and 80s to Central Park in New York, you would have found that it was an embarrassing dump.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It was in really poor shape. And so what happened in Utica was actually just representative of what happened everywhere else. And in places where these parks have come back, it's been because of nonprofit organizations that have partnered with local government. So 75% of the cost of maintaining Central Park is borne by a nonprofit organization, the Central Park Conservancy. And that's our model. And that's the model that's been replicated everywhere. It was actually first pioneered in upstate New York and Buffalo. And everybody else has taken their cue from Buffalo, Boston, New York, and so on. So our mission right now, since we can't, it's not realistic to try and fix the entire system at once, we decided to focus on the smallest part, just 62 acres, which is called Frederick T. Proctor Park, because there are actually two Proctor Parks. They're kind of conjoined by a little slip of land, but they were built at different times, and they have different moods. So like the Proctor Park you're referring to, Thomas R. Proctor Park, that was always meant to be sort of a giant playground. This park was supposed to be what they call a pastoral park. It's supposed to create the illusion of nature, and it's for people to just walk around or run or ride their bikes and just commune with nature, so that's our number one mission right now, is to put that park back into the sort of condition it should be in. And over the last couple of years, we have been getting closer to our goal. I think in another couple of years, we will have reset the baseline, and that park will be back as far back to where it should be as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. Kelly and I just did our first trip to London, and I know you spent some time in Europe, and just total coincidence or happenstance, they put us in a hotel that was right next to Hyde Park.
Oh, nice.
And we spent almost every morning
walking.
We did
the
loop through Hyde Park and saw much of what you're talking about, and just the people watching was awesome. Who's just reading, who's doing the bike, who's doing the morning jogs, who's, and then the nature, all the different types of birds and ducks. And it was just an amazing morning walk. And it ended at a little coffee shop where we sat and enjoyed coffee there. And when you sent the pictures, I was like, oh my gosh, we've been here half a century, and I've never walked through Proctor Park. And I saw the pictures you sent, and I'm like, this reminds me of Hyde Park in London. So that was just kind of a, tip of the cap to you guys for the work you're doing, and I could see the vision. Let's talk about the manpower and the money, because this is not a small operation, right? You're talking closing in on $500,000 raised, and I can't even imagine how many hours. You've used the word "we" more than once during this conversation. So talk a little bit about the part no one wants to talk about, right? The hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
Where are you finding people? How many people are there that are a part of this, and how are you generating revenue to make it all happen?
I have a great team. The board of directors of the of Olmsted City, which is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation, are fantastic. They have a range of skills. Some of the people are more behind the scenes people, and others are out in the field. I do a little bit of both. I'm kind of like the back office guy, and but I also get out there once in a while, especially at this time of the year after the heat started to ebb, and I go to the park and spend hours just doing work, and find it kind of that's like going to the gym for me.
Yeah.
And but we do rely on. So we have no paid employees. We have no office. So our overhead is something like 10%, and most of that's communications and thank you notes. We do rely on people from the community to show up on our twice a month work days from late April till the end of October. We have two of these work days a month, or service days as we call them. And people can send us an email and say, put me on the list. No obligations. You don't have to come at all if you don't want, although every year I'll write to everybody and say, do you really want to be on this list? And people can come when they want and leave when they want. They're typically 3 hours. And sometimes we get also groups from local colleges, from local businesses, local organizations who come and do service days. And so when we plant trees, for instance, we put out the call, and we typically get crews of people from organizations and businesses, plus just average people who just show up. It's a little bit of a challenge, to be perfectly honest, because it's random. You put the call out and say, we're going to be there on Saturday at from 10 to 1. And if I'm captaining that day, I show up and I think, okay, am I going to be here alone with my clippers, or are there going to be 10 people? You can never really tell. But by and large, we get a good turnout. We get what we need. I think we're getting better at cycling through the work that needs to be done. I think we have a better sense of how the punch list should look. The money, we largely raise that just by putting out a few communications a year, a letter in the spring, and then a newsletter in the fall. Which is currently in development for this fall. And between those two, we raise quite a bit of money. Now, when we have really big projects, then we go out and do serious fundraising. And by far, the most serious fundraising effort we did was an early project, the recreation of the Lily Pond, which is this a concrete reflecting pool that was designed by Olmsted in 1913 and built the same year. And after 110 years of service, that thing was in pretty poor shape. So it couldn't be restored. So we had to rebuild it. And we hired an architectural firm. They did a design, and then we put it out for bids, and we had a construction company that came in and built this for us. And that was about $170,000 to $190,000 that we had to raise, and we raised it in about 4 months.
Wow!
And we had a leadership gift from somebody outside the area of $50,000 to kick things off. But then the community rose to the challenge, and I did a lot of the salesmanship on that, and I have to confess, I don't really want to go through that again too soon.
It's not easy.
It is not easy. And then recently we did get a what's known as an urban forestry grant. And so this year, out of that grant, we spent, I think, about $80,000, then plus about 30 years or so of our own money. Closer to 40 probably. Fundraising is not something that I enjoy doing. I don't like asking people for money, and I don't think there are a lot of people who like it, but it is what it is required. This is how it works. If you really want this stuff to happen, either volunteer or kick in some money, or at least talk us up.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to get you in trouble. And I don't want to get political, but the City of Utica owns the park.
Yes.
All right. So, the obvious question here is, and you already alluded to, there has to be a partnership. What does that partnership look like with the City of Utica?
Right now, it's quite good. And it's been a process. When I first showed up and started talking about doing this, You could see the skepticism and almost the weariness and wariness. And somebody who's pretty wise of the ways of the world said to me, well, the way it works is this. A city like this has, everybody has limitations, and Utica has more budgetary limitations than many places in this country. So they can only do so much. And at the same time, they're inundated by people who have bright ideas or complaints, and they have to figure out how to prioritize things. And when it comes to coming to them with bright ideas, they will step up to the plate if you show you have skin in the game. And if you show that this is something that people really want. So this whole thing started with just a few people going into the park and starting to prune trees and raking up things and recreating flower beds and things like that. And then when we did the Lily Pond project, I think that was when in the previous administration, they really started to say, okay, these guys are serious. So now it's gotten to the point where it really is starting to look like the partnership that exists in other communities. And City Hall and our organization don't always see these things the same way, but that's just life. We actually have, I think, a pretty good relationship. And so right now, I spoke for years about recreating a pathway through the ravine in the park. There used to be one there, 2 gigantic stone staircases that go down into this ravine, but the pathway disappeared long ago because of water management problems. So it was always soggy down there. So we did an experiment where we invested some of our money in regrading down there and putting in drainage trenches, very simple, just to see if it could dry out if it had a proper drainage system. And sure enough, the experiment showed that it could be done. Well, the City of Utica is now building that pathway. They have now put their own skin, as it were, into the game. And then for our part, we're going to fix the landscaping around there, and we have already repaired the stone staircase, which is in poor shape. So
yeah, it's awesome.
So when you talk about these work days, the number one thing where my brain goes is schools. We have honor society where service hours are required. And I know that sometimes kids struggle, kids that play sports or getting those service hours in, that this would be a great opportunity for schools to be able to send some volunteers. Obviously, they would just be doing raking and stuff like that. But it is a great opportunity for schools to help out, too, as well, with that partnership.
Great.
So what changes have you seen in community as far as engagement goes? Have you seen, the number of volunteers go up and the number of people that want to help to restore the park?
I think we're seeing more people who are willing to give time, more people willing to give money. We're also seeing a lot of just moral support, and that's not to be underestimated. None of us do this for praise. This was not an obvious slam dunk way to get praise, because there was no guarantee that we were going to succeed in what we were doing. But the praise or the thanks that we get. And when you're there working randomly, people stop and say thank you and sometimes have conversations with you. To me, that tells me that we are succeeding in doing what we did. That plus, given the fact that the number of people who are coming to the park has, by all accounts, gone up.
Yep.
It's very difficult to monitor who uses parks because they're not gated. But everybody, all the regulars at the park.
Every time I drive by there, I always see somebody walking on the trail or running. And it would be interesting to have that conversation with a person that's part of their weekly routine and how it's changed.
Well, they do come up. The regulars, they see me at the park and they say, "Oh, I like what you did over there. I like that you did it over there. There are more people coming here."
That's awesome.
And just the spirit that's prevailing there is really generally very positive. I think we can see that there's an impact, and more people are familiar now with the whole Olmsted narrative, and I think it is slowly becoming part of the local identity. It's going to take more time, but it's happening. So I think we're succeeding on all fronts. It's just that it's not easy running an organization when you don't have paid employees.
It's not easy with paid employees.
But I'm just saying, I think that there are a lot more people at least, I mean, we have an Airbnb, and there are people that make Utica their destination. We've had that a couple of times this summer. Families come and because we have the Adirondacks so close and Old Forge. And this is a great thing for people to utilize, that even as local people that live here, we need to spend more time in the park, because I never even realized it was this big. And
yeah, it is interesting because we've got a place in North Utica that we use as an Airbnb, and we always ask, why are you coming to Utica? And because we want to find out if they're just coming to party in our Airbnb.
Well, that we don't approve of, but so don't.
But we get a lot of people who are like, well, we've never been to Utica, and we want to check it out, and it's wild, right?
It's exciting, is what it is.
It is, and I hear anecdotally from local business people that over the last number of years, they've seen more people doing stopovers. So, something like 8 million cars pass through this area every year, and people have to stop somewhere, right? If they're going on a long trip. So they, part of what our strategy, so we also feel that we're making a contribution to economic redevelopment here, because the more things we have of interest for people to see and do in this area, the more likely that people are to either become those intentional visitors we've come specifically to see this area, or those people who are on their way to Ohio or something like that and have to stop somewhere. And they'll stop in the place where they think, oh, yeah, there's some cool things to do in this town.
Yeah.
And, again, outside of our area, there are plenty of people who know the name Olmsted. Now, nobody wants to come see a dumpy Olmsted Park, but if they see one that's been restored and is in beautiful shape, they might come and see it. I mean, they're actually Olmsted groupies, as I like to call them.
That was my next question.
There are people who will drive out of their way to come see an Olmsted Park. I just heard from somebody in Connecticut who did that. And furthermore, about the economic development angle on all of this, we need to attract and retain in this region more enterprises and enterprising people. Right, we need more capital in this region, and a lot of where that's going to come from, or those people are going to come from, are from larger metropolitan areas. These are areas that are accustomed to having, where people are accustomed to having parks like these, where they do know the name Olmsted. It does have a cachet to people outside this area. I know because I've talked to a lot of people who've transplanted the area for various reasons, and they said that they were pleasantly surprised that we have a park like this, as well as something like Conkling Park, which is this 385-acre behemoth, right, with golf course and zoo and all that stuff. And the fact that it was designed by an Olmsted really has a certain ring to them. So you want people who have to come here for business reasons to be proud of being here and to like the lifestyle. And because we do actually have a lot of quality of life amenities, and this system is one of them. It is intentionally designed. Each piece of it serves a different purpose and offers different things for you to do. So we're just talking mostly about one part of the system, but we could go on and on about the others.
Well, it's funny you would bring up, the system and Conkling Park, and, I've run 15, 16 Boilermakers, and you've done 10 or 12. And until this very moment, I never realized, 2/3 of the Boilermaker is through exactly what you're talking about. Exactly. And it just doesn't get talked about enough.
Exactly. Although, I want to give a shout out to the people at the Boilermaker, because they have tried to underscore that in recent years, and I appreciate that very much. We were all surprised when we sat back and said, "Oh yeah," because when you're going down Parkway East, it's not just the Parkway, but all of the houses on both sides, the land on which they're located, those houses along Parkway East, the streets, all that was designed by Olmsted Brothers. Even the grading of the soil, that was all designed by Olmsted Brothers. So yeah, the Boilermaker goes through that whole zone that I'm describing, or a large part of it. They don't get all the way up to Proctor Boulevard and Ridgewood in South Utica, but yeah, it's easily forgotten because, again, we don't talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's shift gears a little bit, because you're a wealth of knowledge, truly. And, you're a historian, and you've studied Utica's immigration history deeply. our grandparents came. Mine were from Oriolo, Italy, kind of the
My
heel of the
great-grandmother-
boot. And
My great grandfather came from
so
Sicily.
southern Italy, and then
Yep.
we've
We're
got
paisans.
Yep.
and we've got some Scottish, and we've got some Irish,
Yep.
and it gets a little whatever.
I'm
But
definitely a mixture of everything.
but we've seen this again of late. Right. And talk about maybe the parallels or how you studied this at the turn of the century. And now you're seeing it with the Bosnian, Russian, Herzegovinian communities that are here now.
Yeah, so we maybe should start with Thomas R. Proctor, who's the local businessman and philanthropist, a transplant. Said he was born in Vermont, which is true, but he actually grew up in Boston, right near the Boston Common and the Boston Public Gardens. So he grew up with parks like this. In the late 19th century, he had a vision for Utica. He actually was afraid that Utica was falling behind already in the late 19th century. And he saw the creation of these parks and the Parkway and the neighborhoods, because he envisioned that too. He said, if we build the Parkway and we build these parks, real estate developers are going to come in and build neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. And so he had this strategy for Utica. So far as the neighborhoods are concerned, he envisioned them as places where middle-class and well-to-do people would live, and that they would be more suitable neighborhoods. They would suit modern tastes. But when it came to the parks, he was concerned about what they used to refer to as the working man and the working man's family. And in the early part of the 20th century, who was the working man in Utica and places like it? Yeah. Immigrants and their children.
Yeah.
I mean, Utica in the early 20th century was something on the order of 60% foreign-born immigrants and the children of immigrants. So when he built the park, and he actually said, I'm not building these parks for people like me. He said, because people like me have the money and the time to get in our cars and drive out to the countryside whenever we want to, and we can go up to the Adirondacks or we can join country clubs. I'm concerned about the working man and providing a better quality of life for working people in Utica. And that most certainly was the immigrants. I mean, the guy wasn't a fool. He knew exactly what the composition of the city was. So if he were alive today and he went to the park, he'd see different sorts of people, but he'd say, yep, this is it. This is what I built it for. Because if you go into F.T. Proctor Park on a busy day especially, you're going to see a representative cross-section of the city of Utica as it is today. So absolutely, what is going on there now is exactly what I had in mind. Years ago, it was the Italians, and now it's, as you say, the Bosnians and the Syrians and, the Karens and everybody, the dozen and a half different groups that populate Utica and make it the interesting place it is today.
So you've traveled extensively and seen many other small cities. What does Utica have that you think others don't, aside from the park?
Well, so aside from the Parks and Parkway system and these neighborhoods that I'm talking about, we also have one of the finest regional art museums and schools of art in the country. I mean, you're not going to find this in every small place like Utica, with a gallery that's designed no less by a guy named Philip Johnson, who's one of the most famous architects of late 20th century America. You're going to find a pretty vibrant sports scene. It's professional sports. So it may not be, the big leagues, but, there's a lot going on there, and a lot of people really enjoy that. We have a fine community arts center in the Stanley Theater, which not only puts on a lot of shows, but it's itself a highly significant piece of American architecture in ways that, we don't have time to get into, but trust me on that. And they're going to, again, find affordability. And also, here we are in the foothills of the Adirondacks. And so you can, within a short drive of this place, and, one of the things that people don't appreciate about upstate New York generally, but especially the part of upstate New York that's west of the Hudson and south of the Adirondacks, both of which have become increasingly popular to people from the New York City area, is how really rich the natural beauty of this region is. Within an hour's drive of Utica, you can go to dozens of lakes and waterfalls and parks with trails. if you're at all into the outdoors, into nature, and getting that kind of outdoor exercise and just enjoying being outside of the hustle and bustle of everyday living, there's just so many opportunities. And if you start going further west, well, it flattens out a little bit, but then you have things like the Finger Lakes, and you have other interesting cities like Rochester and Buffalo. So all of our cities along this east-west axis, as I call it, of the state between Albany and Buffalo is deeply underappreciated. When people from the outside come here, they say, "Wow, this is beautiful." I had a guy who's from Florida who's into a famous American golf course designer, and I took him to Valley View Golf Course, and we got up on one of the hills, and he looked out and he said, "Look at that." He said, "There's no place in Florida where you can get a view like this."
Yeah.
It is so funny you bring that up.
We just played there.
We just played, and it was the first time I played there. Scott golfs way more than I do, and it was the first time we had played at Valley View, and I can't remember what hole we were on.
It's probably the same one
You
talking
can see
about,
the whole city, and I was like, "This is beautiful."
Yes.
It really is.
Yes. Just recently, even though we're all upstaters, I've an old friend from Albany, and she and her husband came. We do this once a year by train to Utica, and then we drove back, and we always do something. So we went to the Jordanville Monastery, which is this little piece of Russia in the middle of the countryside, and beautiful countryside, and this like amazing piece of architecture you won't just see anywhere. Then we drove down to Richfield Springs, and then we went up Route 20 to Glimmerglass Park, and we went to Hyde Hall, which is this early 19th century mansion up on a hill that has been restored, and it's a magnificent place. And so all these places that we stopped were themselves interesting and beautiful, but we're just driving around the countryside and seeing the rolling hills and the fields, and the planted fields, the open fields, the stands of trees. And we said several times, like, look at this. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
There's so much of the country. I mean, not to put anybody down, but if you go out to the Midwest, you're not going to see anything like that.
You can put the Midwest down. A couple things here, right? So you got to be careful what you wish for with modern development, right? We talk about, well, we don't have things that certain cities have. And we lived in Northern Virginia during a time when everybody was moving to Northern Virginia. It's kind of like now everyone's moving to the Carolinas and Tennessee. But and the infrastructure couldn't keep up. And when we were buying our first home, all of these communities we were looking at, they were cookie cutter. Every freaking house looked the same. Every community looked the same. Every shopping mall we went to looked the same. And every outdoor, it's just, and what you're describing is so much different. It's uniquely here. It's uniquely us, right? And so you got to kind of, we need modernization and development, but not at a cost of losing our history and the beauty of the place either.
Exactly.
And the last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap this up, is we had an amazing neighbor. He was like became part of our family here and locally, and he's since passed, but he was like a grandfather to our children, and he traveled around the area for work, and we were talking one day, and from our house there's a nice little, it's white noise to us, we don't think about it, right? But hillside, and it was the fall and the foliage and whatever, and we got talking. He goes, this guy today, he said to me whatever, he's bashing the area. He goes, I looked at him and I pointed, I said, are you kidding me? Like, look at that. Are you kidding me? So it's funny when you say, are you kidding me? You reminded me of Sam, reminded me of
Samism, yep.
Yeah, just look around. He goes, are you kidding me? This place is great. So anyways, we always end these with 5 or 6 rapid fire questions. I thought I'd get creative with this one because you mentioned in your notes that there's so many hidden treasures hiding in plain sight right around us. And so I was going to have you list like 5 of them. But you just listed like 15 during the last answer. So I'll still give you the opportunity to maybe just take a deep breath and think about just a handful of places that, like you say, are hiding in plain sight. You already mentioned the Stanley and Munson Williams and different things like that. But anything else that comes to mind that maybe people don't realize?
Yeah, so in Utica, we actually have architecture and public art that is basically national class. the Savings Bank of Utica building, the Gold Dome, and the Genesee Tower that's in Lower Genesee Street, Utica's first skyscraper. It's something like 10 stories. Those were both designed by the guy who designed a mansion on Fifth Avenue called the Morton Plant House, which since 1916 or 17 has been the headquarters of Cartier. So when you go to Manhattan, you're walking down Fifth Avenue, you see Cartier's with all those red awnings on it. That was built by the same architect. The Adirondack Bank building, which is at the corner of Elizabeth Street and Genesee Street, was designed by the same architectural firm that designed the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the New York Historical Society on Central Park West, the Herbert Hoover Commerce Building in Washington D.C., the railroad station. Everybody's proud of it, but it was designed by the lead architect on Grand Central Station, and let me think. The fountain that's on the Parkway is a little fountain over near the tennis courts on the Elm Street intersection. It's called the Swan Memorial Fountain, and that was designed by the artist who designed the statues on Archway in Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn by Prospect Park. Designed a statue of Nathan Hale that's on the lawn of the City Hall in New York City. His work is in all the major art galleries in the United States and even a few in Europe. So we have a lot of this stuff. There are other works of architecture that are done by lesser known people that still are really beautiful. We just drive by it all the time, and we don't really notice it. Like you say, people come to Utica and who look at the place with fresh eyes say, this place has potential. Or as one of my board members who's not from Utica, and he's a transplant, maybe about 5-6 years ago, said, Utica has good bones. And we just need to take better care of what we have and to stop ripping everything down. Yeah. You can't save every old building. I'm not kind of an absolutist about this stuff, but we need to recognize the things that have value and to find ways to do what they call adaptive reuse, where you take an old building and you fix it up in ways that suit modern needs, instead of just ripping it down and putting up something that could very well be anywhere. Right. At some point, you end up with a place that looks like Albuquerque, and that's
Yeah.
You're taking it from Midwest to West now, Southwest. I'll mess this up, but you won't. And we'll end here, but the odd, right? Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
What's the parallel there? So I don't mess it up. But one was designed after the other, correct?
So the roof suspension system, which uses cables, was that the auditorium was the first place in the world that was ever done, and it was. I think, if I recall correctly, was partly the brainchild of a guy who has an interesting name of Lev Zetlin, not to be confused with a band, and so essentially the method that is used on Madison Square Garden was pioneered in Utica, and some sort of American Architectural Society has named it a National Architectural Landmark. Yeah. So when they did that in 1960, they were way out there, and thank God that it's still there. I mean, at one point it was in very bad shape, and what were they thinking about doing? Tear it down, and aren't we all glad that they didn't tear it down? So
so the sports bar they put on the annex there, the 72 cables is homage to that design, which is well done. A lot of fun, Phil. Thank you for carving out time to be with us.
Oh, thank you for making time to have me with you.
When we talk about celebrating things locally, I don't know if we've ever had anyone better.
Someone more passionate
help us
and
with
knowledgeable on the history of our city of Utica.
Olmsted
really is
City
awesome.
of Greater Utica. How do people connect? We'll link all this in the show notes, but what's a quick and easy way for them to connect with you guys so they know about upcoming projects and can give you all of their money?
Yes.
Every service hours and volunteer.
Yes, 24 hours a day. We have a very active Facebook page. You can find a lot of information. Our contact information. You can find photo essays on what we've done. We just did one recently that's turned out to be very popular. Also, you can contact us through email at olmstedcity at gmail.com. And there's a special spelling to Olmsted that you'll get at the end of this show. So either way, you can contact us. You can message us through Facebook, or you can email us. And those are the principal ways. Because again, we don't have an office, and I'm not going to give you my telephone number.
Smart man. Phil Bean, appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.